The morning began quietly on the wide Dakota plains with snow covering everything in a soft white blanket. The world looked peaceful, but Clara Johnson knew that peace could turn into danger in a matter of hours out here. The sky, though pale and still, had that heavy look she'd learned to recognize, a warning that another winter storm was coming. Clara pulled her wool coat tighter around her as she stepped out of her small wooden ranch house. Her breath made tiny clouds in the freezing air. She had lived alone for 5 years now, ever since her parents passed away and left her the ranch. It wasn't an easy life, but it was hers. She cared for her animals, kept the fences in shape, and managed to get through the cold months by being practical and brave. As she checked on her horses, she noticed the wind picking up, blowing flakes of snow from the trees. The sky darkened by noon and the quiet stillness gave way to a distant rumbling sound, a storm beginning to build. Clara sighed, knowing she had little time before it hit. She hurried through her chores, feeding the animals, locking the barn doors, and making sure the chimney was clear. Inside her house, she lit a fire, boiled water, and set out food that wouldn't spoil easily. By the time she sat down with a cup of hot tea, the wind outside had turned into a roar. Within an hour, the snowstorm arrived in full force. The blizzard howled across the open land, erasing everything in sight. The air turned into a swirling wall of white. Clara could barely see beyond her porch when she tried to look out the window. The sound of the wind against the wooden walls made the little house tremble slightly, but she wasn't afraid. She had seen many storms before. Still, there was something different about this one. It felt heavier, angrier somehow. The snow came down thick and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Even the sound of her horses in the barn faded under the noise of the storm. Hours passed. The light outside dimmed and the afternoon looked more like dusk. Clara wrapped herself in a blanket near the fire and tried to read a book to pass the time. But her mind kept drifting. She thought about the families that lived miles away, especially the Lakota community she sometimes traded with. They were kind people who often passed by in the summer, offering handmade goods or helping her fix her fences. She wondered how they managed in such harsh weather, with so many children and elders to care for. Suddenly, a faint sound caught her attention. It was soft at first, nearly lost in the wind. Clara lifted her head and listened carefully. There it was again, a muffled cry like a voice calling for help. She stood up quickly, her heart racing. Maybe it was the wind playing tricks on her ears, or maybe someone was out there. Clara rushed to the window, pressing her face close to the frosted glass. All she could see was snow whipping past. Still, she heard it again, clearer this time. It was a human sound, small and desperate. Without a second thought, she threw on her heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and grabbed the lantern hanging by the door. The moment she opened the door, the wind nearly knocked her back. The cold bit at her skin like needles, and snow filled her boots within seconds. But she pushed forward, shielding the lantern flame with her hand. She called out, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Hello, is anyone out there?" No answer. She moved a few steps away from the porch, then stopped to listen again. The sound came from somewhere to her left, a faint cry, weak but real. She followed it, trudging through snow that reached her knees. The cold stung her face, but she ignored it. Finally, through the blinding white, she saw movement. 2 small figures huddled together beside a fence post. For a moment, her heart froze. They were children. "Dear Lord," she whispered, rushing toward them. As she reached them, she could see they were 2 boys, no older than 10 or 12. Their faces were pale, lips trembling, eyes half closed. One of them had his arm around the other as if trying to keep him warm. "It's okay," Clara said quickly, dropping to her knees beside them. "You're safe now. I'm going to help you." The older boy tried to speak, but his voice came out as a weak whisper. We lost our horse." Clara nodded, brushing snow off their faces. "We'll talk inside. You need warmth first." With great effort, she lifted the younger boy into her arms. He was light as a feather, but his body was stiff from the cold. The older one clung to her coat, barely able to walk. Step by step, Clara led them through the swirling snow, back toward the faint outline of her cabin. The wind howled louder, but she didn't stop until they were safely inside. Once the door was shut, the warmth of the fire began to fight the cold that clung to them. Clara set the younger boy down on a rug near the fireplace and helped the older one out of his soaked coat. She grabbed extra blankets, wrapping them tightly around both of them. "It's all right," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "You're safe now. You're going to be all right." The older boy looked at her with tired eyes. "My name's Nash," he whispered. "This is my brother Tate." Clara smiled gently. "Nice to meet you, Nash. I'm Clara." She poured warm tea into cups and held one to Tate's lips, making sure he drank slowly. Then she gave some to Nash. Both boys had frostbitten fingers, but not too bad. She rubbed their hands gently, careful not to hurt them. "Where are you from?" Clara asked once they were warm enough to talk. "From the Lakota camp," Nash said. "We were supposed to go home before the storm, but our horse ran away. We tried to follow the trail, but it disappeared." His voice cracked with guilt. "I told Tate it'd be fine." Clara shook her head kindly. "You did your best. You're brave to have kept your brother safe this long." Tate stirred and looked up at her, his eyes glassy but curious. "You live alone?" he asked softly. Clara smiled faintly. "Yes, I do. But it gets a little lonely sometimes. So I'm very glad you found me today." The boys exchanged a small smile. It was the first one she had seen on their faces. As the storm continued outside, Clara cooked some soup. The smell of it filled the little cabin, mixing with the scent of burning wood. She watched the boys eat slowly, their energy returning bit by bit. They told her about their home, about their mother who made the best fry bread, and their older brother Jace, who always looked after them. "He's probably looking for us right now," Nash said, his voice low. Clara nodded. "I'm sure he is. Once the storm clears, we'll find a way to get you home." That night the wind howled like a wild animal. But inside the little cabin, the three of them were warm and safe. Clara tucked the boys into bed on the couch, covering them with every blanket she could find. Before blowing out the lantern, she looked at them one last time, their faces peaceful in sleep. She sat near the fire, watching the flames flicker, and thought about how strange life could be. One moment she had been alone in the middle of a blizzard. The next she had two young lives to protect. As she listened to the wind outside, she whispered softly to herself, "You did the right thing, Clara." For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel lonely. There was warmth in her house, not just from the fire, but from the quiet presence of the two boys she had rescued. The storm raged on for most of the night, but Clara didn't sleep much. She stayed awake, adding wood to the fire and checking on the boys now and then. Each time she saw them breathing softly under the blankets, a calm peace filled her heart. By dawn, the storm began to die down. The wind weakened, and the first rays of morning light peeked through the clouds. Clara opened the door just a little and saw the world covered in fresh snow, smooth and shining like silver. The land looked reborn. Behind her, Tate stirred and murmured, "Is it over?" Clara turned and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Something about these boys, the way fate had brought them to her door, felt important, as if her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet see. She didn't know it yet. But the act of saving two lost children in a blizzard would lead her to meet the man who would change her world forever. The storm finally stopped. The howling wind that had trapped Clara inside her cabin for hours had quieted, leaving the world outside still and bright with fresh snow. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air smelled clean, and the sun peeked weakly through the clouds, casting a soft glow on everything it touched. It was as if the land was breathing again, no longer suffocating beneath the heavy white blanket. Clara sat in the corner of her cabin, watching the two boys sleep. Tate and Nash had finally settled into a peaceful slumber, their faces relaxed now that the warmth of the fire had worked its magic on them. They were no longer the fragile, frostbitten children she had found earlier in the blizzard. Now they were just two boys who had been given a second chance at life, and Clara couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief for them. She had never been one to take risks, but something about these boys, their wide eyes, their quiet bravery, had stirred something in her. It was a feeling that reached deeper than simple compassion. It was as if fate had placed them in her care for a reason she couldn't yet understand. As the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Clara reflected on the events of the night. The storm had been fierce, far stronger than the usual winter winds. But she hadn't hesitated when she'd heard the boys' faint cries. She had known without a doubt that she couldn't leave them out there in the cold. There was no way she would have turned her back on them. And yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her actions were leading to something greater. She had lived alone for so long, accustomed to the silence that the wilderness often provided. She was used to the solitude of her ranch, the endless tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. But helping Tate and Nash had reminded her that sometimes life had a way of pulling people together, even when they didn't expect it. As dawn's light slowly filled the room, Clara stood up and stretched. She was sore from the long night spent tending to the boys, but the thought of helping them get home made her feel energized. The world outside had been transformed by the snowstorm. Everything was covered in a thick layer of white, peaceful and still. The boys needed to get back to their family, and she was going to help them, no matter what. Clara's mind wandered to their story. Nash had explained to her in bits and pieces that they lived with their mother and older brother Jace at a nearby Lakota camp. The boy's father had passed away a few years ago, and Jace had taken on the role of caring for his younger siblings. Nash spoke of his brother with pride, saying that Jace was always looking out for them. Clara had noticed the sadness in Nash's eyes when he mentioned their brother, and she couldn't help but wonder where Jace was now. Had he been out searching for them all night just like she had? The thought of a family being torn apart by the storm made her heart ache, but she knew she couldn't waste any more time. She had to get the boys back to their family. She moved quietly around the cabin preparing breakfast. The smell of sizzling bacon soon filled the air, and Clara made sure to keep the fire crackling. It was still early and the boys needed their rest. Clara didn't want to wake them too soon, but she knew she couldn't wait forever. As she worked, she thought about how strange it was that after so many years of living alone, she had suddenly found herself with 2 children to care for. It felt almost as if her life had shifted on its axis, pulling her into a world she wasn't entirely familiar with. She was used to tending to herself, doing everything on her own. But now, with the boys in her care, she had a new purpose. By the time breakfast was ready, the boys were waking up. They stretched and yawned, rubbing their eyes like any other children would after a long night's sleep. Clara set the table with hot food and warm tea, and they sat together sharing a quiet meal. Tate, the younger of the two, looked up at Clara with wide eyes, still a little unsure of what was happening. "Are we going home today?" he asked, his voice small and hesitant. Clara nodded, offering him a reassuring smile. "Yes, we're going to get you back to your family. But first, we'll need to wait for the storm to clear up a little more. It's too dangerous to travel just yet." Nash, who had been quieter than his younger brother, spoke up. "Jace is probably out there looking for us, too." Clara nodded again, her heart tightening at the thought of the older brother. She wondered what he was feeling right now. Was he worried? Was he out there in the snow, searching for his brothers just like she had been? As the storm continued to calm down, Clara felt a surge of determination. She had to help the boys get home no matter what it took. The thought of them being without their family made her feel uneasy, and she knew she couldn't leave them in the cold any longer than necessary. After breakfast, Clara cleaned up and prepared for the journey. She gathered extra blankets, some food for the road, and a few small tools just in case they ran into any trouble. She checked the horses in the barn, making sure they were ready to go. The storm had cleared up a little, but it would still be a rough ride through the snow. The boys, now dressed and feeling stronger, helped her with the preparations. Clara was surprised at how willing they were to lend a hand, even though they were still clearly shaken by the events of the previous day. They worked together in silence, but Clara could sense their gratitude, and it made her heart swell with warmth. Once everything was packed and ready, Clara mounted her horse and the boys climbed onto theirs. They set off slowly, moving carefully through the deep snow. The air was crisp and fresh, the world still looking untouched by human hands. The silence was almost overwhelming, broken only by the sound of hooves crunching in the snow. As they rode, Clara could feel the weight of the journey ahead. She didn't know exactly how far they had to go, but she was determined to get the boys back to their family. She didn't know if Jace would be able to find them, or if he had even seen them yet, but Clara couldn't bear the thought of them being separated for long. After a few hours of riding, they came to a small clearing where the tracks from the boys' journey had ended. Clara stopped her horse and dismounted, carefully scanning the area for any signs of life. The snow had covered the tracks, making it difficult to follow their exact path. But Clara felt a strange sense of certainty that they were getting closer. She turned to the boys and said, "We'll have to look carefully from here, but I'm sure we're almost there." Nash nodded, his eyes bright with hope. "I think you're right," he said. I can feel it. With renewed energy, the group pushed forward, riding through the snow until they finally came to the outskirts of the Lakota camp. Clara could see smoke rising from the chimneys and the sound of voices reached her ears. It was a comforting sound after the long, silent ride. As they neared the camp, Clara felt a mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and something else she couldn't quite place. She was glad to have helped the boys, but she also knew that her journey wasn't quite over yet. There was still the matter of their older brother Jace and what would come next, but for now all she wanted was to see the boys reunited with their family. She had done what she set out to do, and the weight in her heart began to lift. Clara felt proud of herself, of the strength she had found in herself when she had needed it most. She had faced the storm, rescued the boys, and helped them find their way home. And in doing so, she had learned something about herself, something she hadn't known before. As Clara and the two boys neared the Lakota camp, the landscape began to shift. The snow-covered plains gave way to scattered pine trees, and in the distance, Clara could see the small, low buildings of the camp emerging from the white haze. The smoke curling up from the chimneys indicated the warmth and life inside. Clara's heart swelled with relief. She had managed to get the boys home. The journey had been long, but it hadn't been in vain. The storm, which had raged on the day before, had left the world covered in a quiet, cold beauty. Yet through all that snow, the boys' faces, now bright with hope, had made the struggle worthwhile. Clara felt a sense of pride in what she had done, though a part of her remained nervous about what would happen next. The boys' family had been missing them, no doubt, and Clara had no idea how they would react to her arrival. But she couldn't worry about that now. Her focus was on getting the boys back to their family safely. As they rode closer to the camp, the sight of familiar figures became clearer. People were moving around, tending to the fires, talking to each other, or feeding their animals. The sounds of laughter and conversation reached Clara's ears, adding to the feeling of warmth and community. She could see that this was a place of comfort, a place where the boys belonged. Nash, who had been quieter than usual during the ride, suddenly sat up straighter. "I think I see them," he said softly, pointing to a group of people gathered near one of the larger fires. His eyes lit up as he nudged Tate gently. "That's our mom," he said, his voice filled with both excitement and worry. Clara's heart skipped a beat as she followed Nash's gaze. She could see a woman standing among the group, wrapped in a thick blanket, speaking to a man beside her. Her long, dark hair was braided neatly down her back, and her face was both strong and gentle. She looked like someone who had known hardship, but had always found a way to rise above it. Clara could only imagine the relief that must be washing over her right now. "We're almost there," Clara said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. She looked at the boys one last time before guiding her horse forward, following Nash's lead. They passed through the outskirts of the camp, where the sound of soft drums and voices mixed with the crackling of fires. The snow crunched beneath the hooves of their horses as they approached the gathering. As they drew nearer, Clara felt the tension in the air grow. She wasn't sure why she felt nervous. After all, she had done nothing wrong. But there was something about the way the camp seemed to pause when they arrived that made her feel out of place. For a moment, she felt like an outsider. Nash leaned forward in his saddle, calling out to the woman who stood near the fire. "Mom! Mom, we're back!" he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Clara could see his eyes glistening as he waved his arms excitedly. "It's us! We made it!" The woman turned slowly, her face still and calm at first, but as soon as she saw her sons, her expression transformed. Her eyes widened and her lips parted in a mixture of surprise and joy. She dropped the blanket she had been holding and ran toward the boys, her footsteps quick and sure. Nash and Tate scrambled off their horses, rushing to meet her. As soon as they were close enough, she pulled them both into a tight hug, holding them close as tears fell down her cheeks. "My boys," she whispered through her sobs, holding them tight as if afraid to let them go. "I thought I'd lost you." Clara dismounted her horse quietly, watching the reunion unfold in front of her. There was something so raw and beautiful about the way the woman embraced her sons, and Clara felt her own throat tighten. She had witnessed a lot in her life, but there was something about this moment that made her realize just how much love could exist between people, how far it could reach, even through the toughest of storms. After a few moments, the woman pulled back, her hands still resting on her son's shoulders. She turned toward Clara, who stood a little off to the side, feeling like she was intruding on a deeply personal moment. The woman's gaze was warm, but searching. "You helped them," the woman said softly, her voice steady despite the tears still glistening in her eyes. "I can't thank you enough." Clara nodded, not quite knowing what to say. She hadn't done it for thanks. She had done it because she couldn't leave the boys out there, lost and alone. But she understood that sometimes gratitude was hard to put into words. "I'm glad I could help," Clara said quietly, her voice soft but sincere. "I'm just happy they're safe." The woman smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I don't know what we would have done without you," she said. "These boys are everything to me. Losing their father was hard enough, and I feared the worst when I didn't see them come back from the storm. I'm just glad I was there when they needed help," Clara replied, offering a small, reassuring smile. As the woman turned back to her sons, she pulled them close again, holding them tightly in her arms. Thank you so much," she repeated, her voice breaking with emotion. She placed a kiss on both boys' foreheads before looking up at Clara again. "My name is Anna Black Elk," she said, her voice steadier now. "And you are?" "Clara Johnson," Clara replied. "I live on a ranch a little ways from here. I found the boys during the storm and I couldn't leave them out there." She hesitated, then added, "I'm just glad they're okay." Anna's expression softened further. "You are a good woman, Clara. You've given us a gift I'll never be able to repay." She turned to her sons, giving them a soft, knowing smile. "You two have a good friend now. Never forget that." Clara smiled warmly. "It's nothing. I'm just glad I could help." As the morning light grew brighter, more members of the Lakota camp gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Anna introduced Clara to them, and though Clara felt a bit overwhelmed by the sudden attention, she couldn't help but feel a connection to these people. The kindness they showed her was a quiet but powerful thing, and she realized that helping the boys had led her to a community of people she would never forget. As Clara stood there, talking with Anna and the others, a man approached them, his stride long and confident. He was tall, with dark hair pulled back into a simple braid, his face strong but gentle. He was the one who had been standing beside Anna earlier, and now he walked toward Clara with a purposeful air. "This is my son's savior," Anna said to him, her voice filled with pride. "Clara Johnson. She saved Nash and Tate in the storm." The man stopped in front of Clara, his eyes studying her for a moment. Then he smiled, a rare but warm smile that reached his eyes. "I am Jace Black Elk," he said, "the boy's older brother. I cannot thank you enough for what you've done for my family." Clara felt her heart skip a beat. She had heard the boys speak of Jace, but seeing him in person was different. He was tall and strong, his face marked with the hardships of life, but there was something undeniably kind about him. She could sense the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders, the same responsibility that had driven him to search for his brothers in the storm. "I was just doing what anyone would have done," Clara said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "They're your family. I couldn't leave them out there." Jace nodded, his eyes lingering on her with a mixture of gratitude and something else that Clara couldn't quite read. "Still," he said softly, "you've done something no one else could. I owe you more than you know." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, but she didn't know how to respond. Words felt too small for what was happening in this moment. All she knew was that she had helped bring these boys home, and in doing so she had found something she hadn't even realized she was looking for. After the reunion, Clara stayed at the Lakota camp for a little while, soaking in the warmth of the fire and the laughter that filled the air. She watched as Anna, Jace, and the boys reunited with the rest of their family and friends. It was a sight to behold. The way the community came together, each person greeting the boys with hugs, kisses, and words of relief. Clara felt a quiet sense of pride for what she had done, but she also couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She had been on her own for so long, living on her small ranch away from the bustle of the world. The idea of community, people who shared not just their homes but their lives, was still new to her. She had always kept to herself, focusing on the land and the animals. It was a life that had served her well, but now, after seeing how tightly knit this group was, Clara wondered if maybe there was something more she could experience. She stood at the edge of the gathering, watching as Jace and his brothers shared stories with the others. They laughed, the warmth of the fire reflecting in their eyes. Clara noticed how Jace seemed to stand a little taller now, his protective nature shining through as he made sure his brothers were taken care of. It was clear that he loved them deeply. Despite the joy of the reunion, Clara couldn't help but feel a bit isolated. She had come to help, but now that the job was done, she wondered if her place was still here. After all, she was a stranger in this community, but as if sensing her thoughts, Jace suddenly turned and caught her eye. He smiled at her, his expression warm and sincere. He was surrounded by his family, yet he made his way toward Clara, his steps sure and purposeful. "Clara," he said, his voice low but steady, "I can't thank you enough for what you've done." He looked toward his brothers who were talking to a group of children nearby. "If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to them." Clara smiled, feeling a flutter in her chest. "It's nothing, Jace. I'm just glad I could help." But Jace shook his head. "No, it's more than that. You didn't just save them, you gave us back our family." He paused, glancing over at his brothers again. "You're a part of this now, Clara. Don't think for a second that you're just a stranger to us." Clara blinked, surprised by the intensity in his voice. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Jace replied, his gaze never leaving hers. "Just know that we're grateful, and we'll never forget what you did for us." Clara's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a warmth spread through her. It was hard to describe the feeling, but something in her chest told her that this moment, this connection, was important. It was more than just the rescue of two boys in a storm. It was something deeper, something she hadn't expected. Jace's eyes softened as he added, "You should stay, at least for a little while. I know Anna would be thrilled, and the boys, they'd love to have you around more." Clara hesitated. The idea of staying in the camp was tempting, but it also felt strange. She had her own life, her own routine. Could she really leave it behind, even for a little while? Before she could answer, Nash came running over, his face lit up with excitement. "Clara, Mom said you're staying for dinner tonight. You have to try her fry bread. No one makes it like she does." His grin was wide, his energy infectious. "We've got a big meal planned. It's going to be amazing." Clara laughed at his enthusiasm. "Well, I'd be a fool to turn down some fry bread." She glanced at Jace, who smiled back at her. "See? You'll be missed if you leave," Jace teased. "Come on, stay. At least for the night." The invitation felt genuine, and Clara found herself nodding before she even realized it. "All right, I'll stay." "For dinner," Nash cheered, jumping up and down with excitement. "Yes, you won't regret it, Clara." Clara couldn't help but smile. In that moment, she realized that her place in this camp wasn't just about helping the boys anymore. It was about something bigger, something she hadn't known she needed. It was about community. It was about connection. And maybe it was about a chance for her to find something she had been missing for a long time. As the sun began to set, the camp came alive with activity. Clara was introduced to more of Anna's family and the other members of the community. The sense of belonging was overwhelming in the best possible way. There were children laughing and running around, adults talking and preparing food, and everyone seemed to move with a shared purpose. Clara felt a sense of peace here, something she hadn't felt in a long time. That night, as the meal was being served, Clara sat at a large wooden table surrounded by Jace, Anna, the boys, and several other members of the camp. The food was plentiful, and the smell of fry bread filled the air, making Clara's stomach growl in anticipation. Anna placed a large platter of golden fry bread in the center of the table, and everyone dug in with gusto. Clara took a bite, savoring the soft, warm bread that melted in her mouth. It was unlike anything she had ever tasted before, and she couldn't help but laugh as she took another piece. "This is amazing," she said, looking up at Anna with a smile. "I can see why Nash was so excited about it." Anna chuckled, her eyes twinkling. It's a family recipe. I'm glad you like it. As they ate, Clara listened to the conversations around her. Nash and Tate were talking animatedly about their adventures in the snow, and Jace was telling stories of their father, sharing memories that made Anna smile and laugh softly. It was a moment of pure warmth, and Clara couldn't help but feel grateful to be a part of it, even if just for the night. After dinner, Jace walked with Clara toward the edge of the camp, away from the noise of the gathering. The air was cold, but the night was clear and the stars twinkled above them. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the land. "I'm glad you stayed," Jace said finally, breaking the silence. "I know it's not easy to just come into someone's life, especially after everything that's happened." Clara nodded. "I never expected to end up here, but I'm glad I did. It feels different, Jace, being here. It feels like, I don't know, like I'm a part of something." Jace turned to her, his expression soft. "You are part of something, Clara. You're part of our family now. We won't forget what you did for us." The sincerity in his voice made Clara's chest tighten. She wasn't sure what was happening between them, but she knew one thing for sure. She felt a connection to Jace, a deeper connection than she had ever expected. "I'm not sure where this goes," Clara said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But I do know that I don't want to leave just yet." Jace's eyes met hers, and for a moment everything else seemed to fade away. The camp, the stars, the cold air, none of it mattered. It was just the two of them, standing there in the quiet night, feeling a bond that neither of them had expected. "I don't want you to leave either," Jace replied softly. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Maybe this is just the beginning, Clara. Maybe we're meant to be a part of each other's lives for a lot longer than either of us thought." Clara didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it. She had found something in this camp, something more than just the boys she had rescued. She had found a sense of belonging, a sense of family, and maybe even something deeper with Jace. As the night stretched on, Clara stayed by his side, feeling the warmth of the fire in her heart. Whatever this new chapter in her life would bring, she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer alone.